Good to gather on a nice winter night here. Our speaker tonight is going to be James Thomas, who I'll introduce right here. So James and I have known each other, well, our daughters have known each other for quite a while, and we've got to know each other kind of through our daughters. I guess first of all, due to a 1 hour stopover at London Heathrow that I was meant to take about 3 years ago, maybe more, and it ended up being an entire weekend. Which we ended up at a party in James's garden, and we ended up having a great time with his whole family. So we've become really great friends since then, and James is a Bible teacher with a real passion for apologetics, which is what he's going to talk about tonight. But we've just had a great weekend together so far already, talking about things like architecture and interest in nutrition, and our families being a similar age as well. So it's been great, even sitting around the fire on a snowy day like this. It's talking about Israel, going to Israel, how churches ought to work, biblical Greek, or just chewing the fat generally. But it's been really good to have James here. Hello, do come in and join us. Hello there. Hi. Did I meet you on Gibson Street, sir? It's very nice to see you. Come in, sit down. You're very welcome here. But yeah, James definitely is a great Bible teacher, and he's going to give us 2 classes tonight. One of which he's taught before, and one of which he hasn't. So I'm not going to tell you which one is which. You can see if you can guess. I have seen the slides for the presentation tonight, but I have to say I do not understand them. I understand partially, but not. Definitely don't know what James is going to say exactly. So it's going to be great. You're going to learn a lot of really good stuff that you can, if you already have a faith, you can use to share that with others. If you don't have a faith, you'll be enriched through that as well. So that's going to be good. We're going to, I'm just looking at different ways of answering the questions that we ask as humans, the questions we ask about God, and the different places that those worldviews ultimately take us to. But like I say, I don't really totally get it, so I'm going to hand over, not waffle too much, but just hand over to James, who's going to teach, I think, roughly about 2 30-minute sessions. We're going to have a Q&A after each one, and we'll have some refreshments in between as well. So just sit back and buckle in. I don't know if you've got buckles on your seats, but you might need them, because it's going to be great. So can I just hand over to you,
great.
And off you go.
Thank you very much.
He's got lots of books here, which I'm sure we'll talk about too. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for the welcome. I do love Glasgow, and I've been here a few times as an architect, which you'll find out. Your architecture is amazing, and I also love the countryside, so I'll talk a bit about that. And we're talking the weekend, because it's today, tonight, and tomorrow morning as well, kind of linked together. It's about Christianity seriously. Can we still take Christianity seriously? And we're going to look at a variety of different things on that. And as an overview, so it's right now in this first 30-minute bit, we're going to look at worldviews, and I'll try and explain what a worldview is. And we look at morals and grief as well. So this is a bit broader. This isn't just about Christianity. And then after the break, we'll look at archaeology in the Bible and how accurate the Bible really is as well. And a little bit about me to start with. So this is my family. So that's me. My wife, Amanda, who is down in Birmingham, she is a teacher, and she's at the KK thing teaching the teachers. And then my oldest son, JJ, and my daughter, Millie. And this is Darwin, the beagle. And one of these is Darcy, and one of these is Reeve. And this is David Moe, the artificial intelligence robot, lawnman as well. So we're a kind of interesting extended family. And about me, I'm an architect. So this is the most famous building I've done, which is an opera house in Morocco. So this was 12 years ago. No, 9 years ago at the...
From space.
Yeah. This was at the groundbreaking with the King of Morocco. My boss couldn't go, so I got to meet the King of Morocco. And this is 2 weeks ago when it opened. A little bit late. Other thing about me is I love going out, the outdoors. I love the trail. So this is the Pennine Way from near Coventry, near Sheffield, to Scotland. So the last time I was in Scotland was in Kurt Yutholm, which is just here. Sorry about the pronunciation there. And this scene was why I like it. So I'd just been overnight. I was 4 days into the trip, and I'd been on my own for the bleakest, the most isolated and horrific weather overnight. And I came as the dawn was rising to this, which is Greg's hut. And there I was able to get a rest and have a sleep as the sun rising. So I adore this because it actually feels like it's a very spiritual journey for me doing these things. And I also love Bible archaeology stuff. Yeah. So this is that's the other kind of fourth quarter, if you like, of what I like. So this is Dead Sea Scrolls. This is Qumran. This is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, in that cave there. And I've got to go there a couple of years ago, which is amazing place to go, and it's just fun. So, what am I talking about? Well, that's me. If I was going to, what makes us tick? So that's the kind of first bit. I suppose this kind of makes me tick. You know, this is some words of Jesus. I've come that they may have life and life to the full. So I suppose what makes me tick is having life to the full. And it's a kind of core belief. And I'm going to talk about core beliefs a bit. And this is a book I came across recently from Sky Jethani, which is interesting. It's called With. And he posed the question that a lot of people say that all religions lead to the same place. You know, that at the end of the day, they're all the same. But he disagrees with that. And I agree with that. He says it's more like this. All religions start in the same place, down in the valley. You know, he says the starting point, we all share a world confused by chaos. That life is inherently chaotic. And from this common beginning, the paths of religions diverge dramatically. But each one is an attempt to overcome suffering, fear, and death. And I think there's a real trope in that. I thought that was really good. That actually, the world is a scary place out there. Yeah. And religions and actually other belief systems are trying to make sense of an unkind, difficult world which is out there. And a polemic question. What do you believe? You know, I think what tonight, the first section particularly, would be to kind of understand what deep down, what are your thoughts? What are your belief patterns? You know, this isn't just about Christianity by any means, but what do you believe? You know, are you willing to share it? To be honest? Do you believe there's no God? Are you an atheist? Do you think there's an unknowable God or force? There's a deist. Do you think there is no truth, no objective truth, or everything is true? Everything's relative. That's a kind of postmodern view, and we're going to look at some of those things. And why would you do that? Well, Carl Jung, famous psychiatrist, says if one does not understand a person, one tends to regard him as a fool. You know, we live in a world where there's great controversy and fights and things going on. And I think if we all just understood and where people were coming from, what their worldview was, then we could treat each other more with respect. You know, just because somebody has a different worldview from you doesn't mean you should disagree with them, but it's helpful to understand what makes someone tick. And I like this quote from, this is the seminal text about worldviews from James Sire, highly recommended. And he writes, for any man to be fully conscious intellectually, they must have a worldview. So it's good to know yourself. And what is a worldview? A set of assumptions that provide the foundation on what they live and have their being. You know, not just about religion, you know, but everyone to understand deep down what they are. A lot of people won't open up to accept what it is. So worldviews. There's lots of different lists which have many overlaps. This is an amalgamation of different worldviews. So at the top, naturalism, modernism, atheism, and belief systems that come from that, nihilism and Marxism, which are slightly different terms of that. Then existentialism and postmodernism, which are, and they may be an unworld view, is a kind of useful bit. There's links between those. New Age, which is kind of the newly emerging worldview, which has many links with paganism. Deism, Eastern pantheistic monism, so it's Hinduism, Buddhism, and others as well, and theism. And under theism, Judaism, Christianity and Islam. So different worldviews. And people who follow these things will have very different outlooks on the way they look at the world outside them. And what makes for a good worldview? So, all right, we'll be straight into it. Some good worldviews are better than others. But firstly, it should be true. It should be true of the reality that's out there. If a worldview isn't true, then you should look back at it and go, maybe that's not good. And it should also not just be true, but to answer the important questions. You know, like if it doesn't answer the questions that are important to you, that's not good. And then thirdly, it should improve us. All of us should be better for the worldview that we follow. You know, to be somebody, actually, I think all humanity wants to improve themselves, and it should be that way. And questions that need on. This is my take on these. And I start with an unusual one. How does it help you deal with grief? Grief is something which is really tough and challenging. The difficult things. How does a worldview help you get through the really tough things on life? What's your purpose? I was just talking with Andy about purpose. It's really important to have a purpose in life. And for a while I lost my purpose, you know, and it was really helpful to re-find it. And then, how do we know what's right and wrong? You know, what are morals, what are ethics, what's the difference, and what happens to a person at death? So important questions. Let's go through these worldviews. Okay. Naturalism, modernism, atheism, and the belief systems that come from it, Marxism and nihilism. It's been around a long time. A lot of people think this is a kind of modern movement coming out with scientists and all these things, but actually Thrasymachus, about 375 BC, is recorded in Plato's Republic saying, without God, might makes right. And you see that in society, that if you don't have a God, it's just, you know, one of his followers, I believe, is Alexander the Great, who, when on his deathbed, said, you know, when asked by the 4 generals who was going to take over, he said, whoever is the strongest. You know, it's a view. It's not a particularly pleasant worldview, but it's a view. And atheists that shape our society today, not so much those, but it's Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, Friedrich Nietzsche. And I'm going to start with Friedrich Nietzsche. God is dead. Key, well-known thing. It's more like God is unimportant in modern society, was his view. And he believed that mankind must reinvent himself through the Übermensch. My German is not great.
Übermensch.
Thank you. Thank you. My son's girlfriend is German, so I need to work on it. You know, that's a Superman in a new image of greatness. And one of the things I found with this book that was really helpful was it helped me understand the cultural references to all these things. So I grew up reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Catch-22 by Joseph Hemingway, Fahrenheit 451. As an adult, I read some Frank Kafka, some Ernest Hemingway, and all those things helped me to think, oh, okay, I do get this a little bit. I do understand some references to nihilism. And I've got to say, I think it's a very honest view, a brutally honest worldview, unlike some. And if I wasn't a Christian, I'd be a nihilist, you know, because there's an honesty to it, you know, there's not a fakeness to it. But with that, I find it unrelentlessly, when I was sort of looking into it, dark, you know, in terms of hopeless, and have to look at what the effect it has on his followers. We talked about that. Adolf Hitler is probably the most famous, and Nietzsche's nihilism had a central place in National Socialism. Soldiers going off to battle would have a field grey copy of this book, The Sword and the Spirit. Nietzsche philosopher. So every soldier going off to war, German soldier, would have a copy. You can still pick them up in Germany today. And within that, And within that then the purification of the Aryan race from Jews, gypsies and the disabled was completely acceptable. The effect. Another take is Marxism or Maoism. I forgot to bring this. I have a treasured copy of the Little Red Book at home, which is, but within that, Marxism, Maoism, atheist teaching, Christianity is generally strongly excluded in those countries. And you think about the USSR under Stalin, China under Mao, Cambodia under Pol Pot, North Korea. Actually, all the greatest genocides of the last 100 years come out of atheist worldviews, not theist Christian worldviews. Scientists, it's frequently believed that scientism is, scientists are all atheists, but they're not. I'm not saying they're all Christians, but Darwin wrote 3 years before he died, I have never been an atheist. He got really irate with people. He was a deist. He thought there was I'll talk about that later. Albert Einstein, I am not an atheist. He was very clear about it. I read a biography of not a Christian, just a secular biography of, he thought two things proved to him that there was a God. One was the universe, the existence of it, the perfectness of the way the universe fit together. The second one was music. He was a violin player, and he, the fact that music existed to him was a proof of God. And Francis Collins is the guy who was responsible for mapping the human genome. And he wrote this. This is in 2000 when he stood next to Bill Clinton in the United States and announced they'd finished mapping the human genome. And he wrote this. He said this. It's awe-inspiring to realise that we have caught the first glimpses of our own instruction book, previously known only to God. Amen. Which is just such a great quote. And the question, does atheism make you a better person? Existentialism, postmodernism, the unworld view. So I put these, there are similarities and overlap between these two. You can read different things. Vivre sévère, vivre l'absurde, which is Albert Camus in The Myth of Sisyphe, which is to live is to bring the absurd to life. And Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, really as a reaction onto the darkness of nihilism and modernism, moved to existentialism. And are really saying to live is to bring the absurd to life. That life is, it's kind of a joke, a comedy, because there is no meaning behind it. Life is meaningless, therefore we live this absurd life. And there was an overlap with postmodernism, which is considered very kind of modern, and it's probably the most moving modern view. Hello. But it's not really modern. In John 18, you hear Jesus speaking in his trial before Pontius Pilate, and Jesus says, when he's been asked, just, mano a mano with Pontius Pilate, said, what are you doing? And Jesus says, I've come to bear witness to the truth. Pontius Pilate's response is, what is truth? And Pontius Pilate at that time, about 30 AD, the Roman life of Romans had been the five senses that you had to, five qualities every Roman needed to have, which were fides, pietas, majestas, virtus, and gravitas. So like gravity, honour, these cultural values that every Roman citizen was supposed to have. But by that point, these were being abandoned. There was no truth anymore. And this is linked, I believe, some people believe, to the answer. There is no truth anymore, and Pontius Pilate refused to do anything and allowed Jesus to be crucified. Postmodernism. Truth, if such a thing exists at all, this is a postmodern view, is a property of culture. There is no absolute truth. All truth is relative. It is created by societies. There is no ultimate moral authority or moral absolute. It's very common. There is no truth anymore. the roots of postmodernism actually come from architecture. In the 1980s, when I was studying architecture, postmodernism was the in thing. And it was this kind of pastiche. And the reason I show this is it's the MI6 building in central London by Terry Fowler, was a very significant postmodern building. I've got to say, postmodernism has not lasted. It has been abandoned as an architectural style. Architects have turned their back on it because while it's interesting intellectually, it doesn't work. A building which is just a pastiche of previous things has been abandoned. And actually architects have gone back to modernism, which is more the work I do today. Or alternative views as well, but definitely not postmodernism. And I found this amusing. The blowing up of this from the James Bond movie was too good an image not to miss. But this is from Sire. Postmodernism puts the smiling face of arrogance from the face of naturalism, modernism, atheism. But no face displays a confidence in truth, a trust in reality, or a credible hope for the future. It's, we learned this in architecture. There is no hope for the future in postmodernism. And the question for you, do you believe in a postmodern worldview where there is no objective truth? New Age. New, but with links to paganism. It's an emerging New Age worldview, considerable overlap. And again, literature. I found literature helped me to understand this. So Aldous Huxley, Philip K. Dick, Robert Heinlein. You can tell I was a big science fiction reader as a teenager. Movies like The Matrix. William Blake, for those who are artists, poets, is very much in line with this. And Carl Jung. Carl Jung was a bit of a mixture. I showed his quote earlier as a psychiatrist. He was a Christian and New Age. But he believed that there was the age of Pisces, so a lot of stuff from astronomy. So he believed that there was an age of Pisces, which was Jesus, and now we're moving into the next age.
Age of Aquarius?
Yes, good man.
I just know the song.
Yeah, we're moving into the the song. We're moving into the age of Aquarius, which is what his view was when he wrote this. And there's a lot of moving back to kind of stuff with this, which Old Testament would condemn. Deuteronomy 18 forbids a lot of practices of, witchcraft and such like, which are common into this. But it's an emerging view of more and more followers. Deism. Deism is, who follows it? The US founding fathers. I'm supposed to say fathers. Someone correct that. So people like Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, Madison were all deists. Darwin, Einstein, would you probably describe as deist as well, and deism is the historical result of the decay of theism, Christian theism, and deists, you get cold deists who are hostile to Christianity, like Voltaire and Buckminster Fuller, and I have faith in the integrity of the. I'll skip that. And warm deists like Benjamin Franklin, who say the immortality of the soul ought to be worshipped. And deists sort of believe that human beings have intelligence, a sense of morality, but none of these is grounded in God's character. None of us have a special relationship with God. Each of us is on our own. God started things off and then he's abandoned and has no interest in anymore. And God is unknowable. And the chief advocate of deism is which is very appealing, and probably the prime reason why is Yoda in the Force. A mysterious energy field created by life that binds the galaxy together. Eastern pantheistic monism, so Hinduism, Buddhism, and the like. And this is a very complex. Even Hinduism on its own is complex. Atman is Brahman, a key teaching of Hinduism. The Atman, the soul, is when we die. Atman is swallowed up in Brahman. We don't last. We're swallowed up into the whole. But it's not, in some ways, not really a single religion. Difficult to define how many gods there are. Perhaps common view, 33 million gods. And the physical world is an illusion. The physical world is evil. And Buddhism, which was actually a reaction against Hinduism in many ways, that there is probably no God. It's a philosophy of psychology. But again, the cause of suffering is desire. You know, if you don't desire, you know, that's fine. And the physical world is an illusion. Leave the physical world behind. You know, don't consider it. Allow suffering to go on. And theism. And theism incorporates Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All a theistic God, a single God. Long views. And there are multiple links. More so, obviously, in some ways, Judaism, Christianity, but actually many links with Islam as well. And I'm going to focus for time on Christianity, on these. You know, and a key one. I'm the way, the truth, and life. You know, thinking back of that image from Sky Jethani, you know, like always lead to God, and they're the same. They're not. I mean, not according to Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. There is only one. And, you know, Judaism still awaits the Messiah. The teachers in the Talmud talks about, from about 100 AD, recorded that the Talmud actually writes about Jesus, that he was killed by the Romans, Herzog I. Islam teaches there is no Messiah, that Jesus was just a prophet. So they're very different views about Jesus between the three. And Augustine. Augustine is like the key teacher of the early church from about 400 AD. He's amazing, Saint Augustine or Augustine. And his teachings are profound. And he talks about two things, the book of creation and the book of life. And what he means is the Bible and the world outside. And he says that both equally teach us about God. And within that, that there's order. Everything we observe, both in the Bible and in the world around us, shows an order, that the world is orderly. So if you think about the Bible, you have things like the 10 Commandments, the 8 Beatitudes. There's an order to it. If you look at the universe around us, we have the law of gravity. We have, or the theory of gravity, should we say, and the theory of evolution. There is an order to it. Things work. And actually both reflect the order, the personality of a greater God, which is profound. And what has the Christian world given us? Science. Most scientists, even today, are theists. You know, they have been, they continue to be. You know, the surveys of scientists are the majority of science are believe in a personal God. The abolition of slavery from the UK, William Wilberforce. You know, civil rights, women's rights. The majority of all benevolent works around the world are still done by, not enough, not as much as the 1st, 2nd and 3rd century, and that those benevolent works are not only done to other Christians, you know, but beyond. So to finish this part, a good worldview successfully answers the important questions that a human asks. And also, one of those is how we deal with grief. And I'm going to move on to that. There are other questions that we talked about, but grief is a really profound and deep one as well. So we're going to talk about the moral law and grief and morals as well on this. And the moral argument is, if there is no God, then there are no universal objective moral values. Sort of a postmodern view. But in fact, moral values, objective moral values do exist. You know, I could say some really horrible things at this point, you know, and everybody would be revolted by them. You know, I could talk about death. I could talk about
eating babies.
Yeah, I could talk about. Thank you. I could talk about eating babies. You know, like hey, let's all go and eat some baby somewhere, and everybody would be revolted by it. I mean, everybody would be. It's an objective, moral, you know, universal value that every human has. You know, that's a disgusting thing to do. And because we all have this, a universal value, then that's a proof that God exists. And I would say, the move to postmodernism, and the loss of the theistic, people believe that objective moral values are disappearing, aren't there. But that's not true. They are there. C.S. Lewis wrote in the 1940s. Back then, he thought that righteousness and sin are old-fashioned in the 1940s. How much more so today? And then the moral law by Immanuel Kant, C.S. Lewis, various. All humans have a set of morals because we're all made in God's image. These morals are evidence of the evident existence of God. And C.S. Lewis goes on and says the difference between morality and ethics, and this is by C.S. Lewis with changes by DJ, that morality is keeping my own ship in order, and that ethics is then how we relate to other people. So if you've got a fleet of ships going along, you've got to do two things. You've got to keep your own ship in order so it can keep on sailing, so it can keep on moving, but you're also part of a fleet, part of a community like this here. So how you relate to other people is ethics. So there's two sides to that. And let's talk about the problem of grief. Relationships are hard. Marriage is hard. I love my wife. We've been just gone through 29 years as married. So, wow. And we're, but any relationship that you care for, where you care for somebody, is by its nature painful. To have a close relationship with anyone is hard, has hardness. Other things are really hard. I founded a company, an architecture company, with my old boss, who I felt close to, a really good other friend, a couple of other guys as well. And a few years later, 4 years later, I called into a room and I was kicked out of the company. I was shocked and hurt and grieved on this. A while back, I got a phone call and my nephew had taken his own life, aged 22, which rocked me. Just Tuesday this week, I went to the funeral of my oldest friend. We've been together since we were 12. We've never lost contact. And steady friendship for 44 years. And that was really hard. Grief is challenging. And I like these words from Queen Elizabeth. Grief is the price we pay for love. And I think that's really true. The only solution to not grieve is to not love anybody. To not just to turn your back on the world. They're really profound words. All humanity grieves. And the only worldview that has an answer to grief is Christian theism. This is my defense of Christian theism. The only one that can have an answer for it. And why do we suffer grief? Primarily it's the actions, the sins of other people. The vast majority of grief that you will suffer, that I will suffer, is because somebody else has done something, horrific. Quite often, it's us being ridiculous, us being sinning, our own actions, whatever that is. A question mark, a big question mark, is creation flawed from the fall? And I'll leave that one. Sometimes I believe that God disciplines us, and and we go through a tough time to be better. Helps us to grow. When I go and do a challenge, I like doing hard things. When I go and do that race and walk from Sheffield to Scotland, then I do it partly because I need to go through hard things to do those things. If we namby-pamby and our godly response gives God glory. That's a tough teaching, but it's a biblical teaching. We come to know Christ because Christ suffered for it. Without suffering, there is no joy. We only understand joy because we've been through hardness. And after great victory comes challenge, which is just so this is what I would say is a theistic explanation of why grief is there. And this is, I think, a better explanation of grief than any of the other worldviews has. And this is why we should camp on this. A a lot of people will say, well, look at Christianity and say their attack against it is about grief. But actually, I would say the opposite is the truth. Is that what we have, what Christians have in Christian theism, is a very difficult explanation. I'm not saying this is easy anyway, but this is the only one which has any substance to it as an explanation of grief. And Jesus wept. You know, theism teaches, Christian theism teaches that the man God Jesus actually understood suffering, you know, unlike anything else. And that's Old Testament as well. The Lamentations, through the Old Testament as well. And he reaches out. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Jesus, at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, his greatest set of teachings in the Bible. So if I go all the way back to my worldview, you know, I think it's linked to that. And I've had to come to understand this, that what I try and make sense of it is life to the full. Life to the full includes lots of things. It's, you know, work, it's family, it's doing crazy sporting events, it's knowing the word and understand that. But it's also accepting that there'll be grief because we love people. That is part of the journey, and that will make me stronger. That's it for this first section. Thank you for sticking with me. We now have some time for Q&A. I think Mike, anyone else wants to come up and join that. And any questions. So this is a prompt. It doesn't have to be anything about this first point. Please come up and ask a question. First question, Simon.
Can I ask you, basically today's...
if it's too hard, I'm going to ask these guys.
Today's culture is very, very much the kind of the wokeism and cancel culture. Would you say that is a very, very modern worldview? Where would you place that worldview?
So that the culture today is about being cancelled and about woke. Yeah. I agree.
The notion that you can say anything unless it expresses a firm view on something, which Christianity usually does towards those things, would that then come into something like postmodernism? Yeah. So maybe it falls into the postmodernism category, perhaps?
I think very much so.
Yeah. I think postmodernism is about you can do anything you like, say anything you like, except criticise postmodernism. Which is quite contradictory.
Yes.
The moment you start to take a stand against postmodernism, then you are to be...
Which you do with, which is the problem with any kind of theism, really, but particularly Christian theism, is that you're saying there is truth. You know, that statement from Jesus, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," would be a red rag to a bull to a postmodernist, or to that. Great question. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. No, that's good. Can I ask for some clarification on the deism side of things?
Yeah.
I think you said something like theism has a personal God. Is it correct to infer that deism is a belief in a deity but without the personal, or is that... Yes.
Yeah, very much
yes.
So the deists would generally believe that there was... Because it's hard to understand the beginning of the universe without a God, you know, the Big Bang, what started it. So it's hard to accept that. So the deists will believe that there is, and see there is some order there. So the deists would believe that God started things off, but sort of wandered off and has not had any interaction with, so it's not personal in any way. And there's a sense also, there's different brands of it, but there's also a sense like God is totally unknowable. You know, that, you know, we're humans, therefore we can't know God. And a rejection of the Bible with that. Right. It's a very an unknowable,
distant, unknowable God.
Something happened. There are some rules, but there's a lot of humanism. The humanist, So
you named a couple of characters that were deist.
Yeah,
I wrote them down.
the founding fathers, Jefferson. So, and you can see a lot of that in the American, the liberties and you know those founding documents of the United States. That was going on then. So it wasn't create our own rules, you know.
Right.
So there isn't any kind of allegiance to the Bible. The Bible's, you know, it's like, oh yeah, God started it off. Now we can make a better society. It's the Enlightenment is a great, you know, it's a very funny because they call it the Enlightenment, but actually the Enlightenment is, well, we're better than the Bible. We're better than theists, and we you know, yeah, those old people had the Bible and believed in the Bible, you know, those kind of things. But we are enlightened now, so we can create a better society.
Yes.
And there was a great sense of belief in that, and now that belief is sort of run out.
Sure.
So
Jojo.
you mentioned the with deism, that they believe there's a God. Yeah, like they believe there's a God, but and then that's the way that the universe is created. How would you argue for God to exist in a theism? Like how would that come into existence?
I would listen, and I would probably do the next bit, which is, you know, there's so many different arguments for the existence of God, but I would listen and ask them to explain. I think if you want to have a conversation, because it's just polite to do so, you know, and we're charged to speak correctly and respect, but it's also a lot of people. If you're standing from a Christian point of view, a lot of people will have an attack on that, but it's a much better conversation in every way is to have a mutual understanding. So to understand, so what do you believe, and to try. Most deism on the whole are much more. There's a much broader range. So, you know, if you have a Christian theist, there is. So saying a deist, that there's a, you know, a million variations on that, and some are soft deists and some are hard deists. So some are very anti-Christianity, which you might be encountering because of that.
You mentioned cold deists and warm deists.
Yeah. So
that's what you would be
cold.
talking about.
Yeah,
there,
exactly.
right.
I'm sure that's. But I think understand first where they believe, and Jesus did this. Paul did this, trying to understand people first, and ask some questions first, and then I would suggest that a defence of the gospel is apologetics. You know, it means defence. Is then develop some things that you're comfortable with to defend the gospel against that, and that might be the moral law, but it might be proof of the Bible and the historicity of the Bible. It might be the cross, the evidence for the cross. You know, Jesus I'm going to talk about that tomorrow morning. You know, Jesus is it's sort of the most documented historic figure that ever was, and the fact that he died on a cross is just, the vast majority of historians would accept that Jesus did live in Galilee, that he did die on a cross, and talk about, you know, and that his disciples believed that he was risen, that Paul believed he was risen, you know, and they encountered him. So that's another defence. I would just develop some, and it's quite fun, you know, to do that as well, to develop some things so that because it'll make you, it'll plant you more firmly on your core belief, make you unshakable. So how to answer to somebody like that who has a different worldview, to understand that, which will enrich both of you, but also to know how to respond.
Can I also add to that answer?
Yeah, please.
This was more C.S. Lewis talking about atheism, but I think the argument still stands with deism. And Yuri Gagarin, when he went up into space.
Oh, yeah.
He very famously said, well, I didn't see God anywhere.
God, yes.
You know, as if he was going to see a throne up in space with God sitting with a beard, floating around, orbiting like a satellite or something.
Did you think you were going to see him?
What did he expect? But it was very, very much this atheist argument. And of course he wasn't going to see that in the same way that Hamlet was never going to experience Shakespeare. Hamlet doesn't know anything about Shakespeare.
No.
Yeah? The only way that Hamlet would know about Shakespeare is if Shakespeare wrote himself into the story. If he wrote himself into the play, then Hamlet would know about Shakespeare. And that's the only way that he would have known about that. And of course, the thing with Christianity is God writes himself into our story with Jesus. How do we understand God? Well, God wrote himself into our story. God came down and became one of us. And that's one of the big things, I think, between sort of theism and atheism.
Great answer. I also have some books here you could look at. So, C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity, fantastic, so well written, just beautifully written, even written in the heart of the Second World War, and as a series of radio performances to the RAF. The Language of God, so this is the guy who mapped the DNA, so like super top scientist, so if you want a scientist's view of God. Case for the Resurrection of Jesus, which is profound about, the historical basis of the cross, and Compelling Evidence for God in the Bible, which is a kind of more general view. So have a read. These are my copies. You're not allowed to take one, but I can. But if someone's
good,
yeah,
excellent. So we're taking a short break just now. Don't see any more hands up. So 10-minute break with some refreshments at the back, and then we'll continue on with the next session. So thanks very much for your attention, and thank you, James. For, refreshments.
The teapots just have water in them.
we don't get food like this down south. Do we? No way. So I think I might emigrate.
Yeah, you can emigrate anytime you like, James. Sort you out with a visa.
Great. Okay, so part 2. Well done for everybody surviving part 1. And part 2. So we're going to look at how accurate the Bible is. Is there any evidence for the Bible? How truthful is it? And we're going to look at some archaeology in the Bible as well. It's all about the evidence of the Bible and answering some questions on that. And I'm going to answer sort of Jojo's question before. So I'm going to make this statement, a slightly bold, polemic statement, that the existence of the Christian God can be demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt to those who are willing to genuinely look. So beyond reasonable doubt. No, so that's like in a law case. That if you look at the evidence, at the end of the day, that evidence is overwhelmingly for the existence of a God, for those who are willing to look. But and this is sort of an anti-answer to that, but I think this is a good response. Blaise Pascal made this answer. God provides some signs of himself visible to those who seek him and not to those who seek him not. And it's a bit like that, ask and you'll receive, seek and you will find. But if you don't seek, it's not there. And I think there's a logic in that as well, which is quite a deep logic, and I think it's a true logic as well. And some people will say in an argument, what, you got no proof. Where is the proof? Where's the? I can't see God. Like, what was the question about Yuri Gagarin? The great, amazing, brave cosmonaut. Cosmonaut, yeah. But it's, I can't see God, and he was looking for proof. But another answer is, prove to me justice. Show me it. Prove to me love. I want to see it. I want empirical evidence of love. What about maths? Prove to me there's a mathematical, what a number is. There isn't a tangible thing to those things. Beauty, tangible evidence of beauty. Now, we all know beauty exists, but how do you measure beauty? How do you provide an empirical things? So in all of those things, you can show beyond reasonable doubt that those things exist, but without an empirical nature. Okay, so biblical accuracy. There are a number of different ways that the accuracy of the Bible comes under attack. One of which is that it's been rewritten. One is there's missing books. What about the inconsistencies in it? And we're going to focus mostly on the first claim, that the Bible has been rewritten. And there's a great... one thing is just like, it's so well attested. There are 17,000 ancient documents of the Old Testament. There's 25,000 ancient documents of the New Testament in different languages, mostly in Greek, mostly in Hebrew, comparatively. But that is so well attested, compared to any other ancient document. It is by far the best attested. And but let's look at one particular one. Let's look at Isaiah. For various books, it says that it was written, the book itself says it was written by Isaiah and his scribe Baruch about 700 BC. And there's a trouble with Isaiah. As you know, Isaiah contains many things, including prophecies of Jesus Christ. But until 1946, the oldest complete copy of the book of Isaiah was this one, the Codex Leningradensis, which is in St. Petersburg. And that is written in 1008 AD. So 1700 years after Isaiah wrote it. That's a big time frame. So all those prophecies about Jesus from Isaiah 53 and such, what do people say? Well, the higher critics and many other people following them would say, well, those were just written into it by the Christians after, the prophecies aren't prophecies at all, they're written afterwards. And there are older versions. This is 350 AD, is a Greek version, but not in Hebrew. It's a Septuagint, and that's in the British Museum. You can go there for free. It's my favourite place in London, just close to Euston Station. Walk in there, it's just on the left. That's the oldest Bible in the world, from about 300 AD. That's the third oldest Bible in the world, next to it in the case. There's usually nobody standing there. It's amazing. That's a page from it. Okay, but was the Old Testament, particularly the Messianic prophecies, rewritten by Christians? That's the big question. Is it all a lie? That's what some people will have a go at you. And 1008 AD, well after Jesus Christ. And then, this photo again, I like this photo. A shepherd boy in 1946 was walking past looking for lost sheep. Muhammad Adib, 1946, November 1946, and he with two friends, and he saw this cave and he threw a stone into it, and he heard a kind of crunch sound, broken pottery. And so he went into it, and inside it found these jars, and inside them were the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain, when they translated them, when they found them, so the Dead Sea Scrolls date from about 200 BC BC to about 150 BC, but all before Christ. And they contain, we were looking at it this morning, so this is the Dead Sea Scrolls Bible, so this is only stuff from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And if you look at this, all translated in English, and there's some gaps there, you don't have every manuscript. It also doesn't have Esther, and it doesn't have Nehemiah, but it has every other book of the Old Testament. And it has 2 copies, very full, of the book of Isaiah, dating from 100 to 150 BC. So this is one of those, the B version. It's got 46 of the 66 chapters. The other one's got slightly more, but this one's got 46. So, what does this one say? How does this compare to the Codex Leningradensis from, this is 100 BC, that's from 1008 AD, 1100 years of change. How much difference are they? How accurate is our Bible? 1100 years. So, quote, top professor, the high degree of accuracy in the Masoretic copying of the manuscripts, although it is separated from the Codex Leningradensis by more than 1,000 years, only 5 complete words are added and 6 words are missing in a text that contains parts or all of 46. There are 11 words difference in the book of Isaiah. So what is that? Well, that is 99.85%, accuracy.
Wow.
So if somebody asks you, the Bible's changed, you can say yes. You're right. 0.15% difference, 11 words difference in Isaiah. That's true. 11 words. And what are those 11 changes? I was asked this. I have done this class before. So I was asked, what are the changes? Because if it was changed Jesus to Satan, for example, that would be quite a major difference. So I did a little bit of digging on that, which was fun. So this is one of the changes from Isaiah 53. The prophecy about Jesus. So in the Codex Leningradensis, it says, after he has suffered, he will, and everyone believes this is a prophecy about Jesus. He will see the fruits of his suffering and will be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant, who we understand to be Jesus, will justify many and he will bear their iniquities. Okay. This is one of the 11 changes. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life. So there is a change there. He will see the light of life. That's interesting. So that makes more sense. So this is an error, but this actually makes it more of a prophecy about Jesus, to my way I read it, than it was before. And this is actually exactly the same as the Codex Vaticanus, the Septuagint, which is the Greek copy. So the Greek and this are exactly the same. By his knowledge, and then we go on, okay? This is 100 BC, okay? So before Jesus existed. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. All the rest of Isaiah 53, no changes whatsoever. And that's the one change in Isaiah 53. So, we can have some confidence about that. Some other things. This is sort of the Cyprus cylinder, discovered in Babylon, 1879. It's in the British Museum. There's a lot of other stuff in the British Museum. When they translated the cylinder, they got this. From me Turnoder, as far as the region of Gutium, the sacred centers on the other side of the Tigris, I returned the images of the gods who had resided there to their places. I gathered all their inhabitants and returned them their dwellings. So what is this? This is Cyrus, who is king at that point, in about 539 BC. So the Jews were, the Bible says, were in exile in Babylon. And this new, they've taken there, by Nebuchadnezzar, a new king appears, Cyrus. And we see in this, him saying, all the people can go back to their homeland, and they can also, it talks about their gods, the images of their gods, they can go back and work, and there was that part of it. So, what does the Bible say? The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation, also put in writing, and he's charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. whoever is among you, all his people, may his God be with him, may go back to Jerusalem. So you get perfect or very, very close archaeological evidence that Cyrus allowed his people to go back to the town, just as the Bible says in Ezra. It's just, and we talked about proof. Can you prove it? No, you can build up a body of evidence which shows beyond reasonable doubt. Okay, Dead Sea Scrolls are old. This is the oldest Bible text. It's my photo of it. It's in the museum in Jerusalem. I wanted to bring out. When I went to Jerusalem, I bought you can buy a facsimile copy, a copy of it in silver, a little necklace. It was probably a piece of jewellery for a woman, and it was buried with her. And they found it, but it dates. The woman is 600 BC, so it's before the exile. And that's a zoom in of it. And it's early Hebrew. It's before. One of the proofs of it is it's before. And when that's translated, this is the words from Numbers. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And give you peace. So it's just a few little bits as a preamble as well. And but this is what we have in Numbers. The Lord, which we in our Bibles translate Yahweh as the Lord. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance to you and give you peace. So when they found this 600-year-old amulet, and this was only about 30 years ago that someone found it. It was actually a teenager who found it. She was helping out with on a archaeological site just on the edge of Jerusalem. When they found it, they found this piece from Numbers. It's extraordinary, the priestly blessing from Numbers. And they found that the word for word, the few words that remain are 100% exactly the same as the Bibles we have today from that. There's no change at all. What about the New Testament? Well, there's a lot more of New Testament, and it's a lot newer, and it was written much closer to the times. Galatians, for example, is written probably 55 AD, only just over 20 years after Jesus had gone. But what about the oldest manuscripts? How are they? Well, who came from Manchester? Did someone come from... You were in Manchester, weren't you? Yeah. You go to Manchester, you can see this. The oldest New Testament text in the world is in Manchester. And it's this, just a tiny little bit from John 18. But it's dated from 125 AD. Now, John was the last gospel written, about 90 AD. So this fragment, which looks from the handwriting analysts say it was probably written by just somebody, not a professional scribe. It's a well-written, but it's probably not a professional scribe, a professional copy. It's just someone making their own copy of like we might do in a quiet time. You might write out a little passage from the Bible, and from John 18, but it's 35 years after the Gospel of John was first written. And you can see this. It's actually opens in sometimes they take it away because they don't want it to deteriorate. But in the spring of next year, it'll be back on public display in Manchester. And you can see it. 35 years, a copy made 35 years after the original was made. And this is just 125 years. We are blessed to have this thing. Yeah. And what about the accuracy of it? Well, this is the Greek. And it's... there's two sides of it. It's written on both sides. So this is the back side. This is Jesus in John 18 when he's speaking to Pontius Pilate. The same passage we were talking about earlier. And it says a king. And the yellow is what is there. The grey is what's, is missing. Yeah. A king I am. For this I have been born, and for this I've come into the world, so that I would test it to fight to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice, said to it. Pilate, what is truth? And this having said, again he went out unto the Jews and said to them, I find not one fault in him. And the words that remain are exactly the same as we have today. This is a modern. This is the seminal, the defined New Testament from which people translate the Bible. So it's the amalgamation, the agreed amalgamation of the New Testament that we would have of the PEF. And those words are exactly the same as that. There's no difference. So in terms of accuracy, it's insane. 100% accurate, written just 35 years after John wrote the Gospel of John. Okay, let's move on. What about the missing books? We'll go quickly on this one. What about the missing books? The books in the Christian Old Testament are exactly the same as in a Jewish Old Testament. There just is no difference whatsoever. They've got slightly different names, and the way they're ordered is slightly different. But the words in a Jewish Bible, which is what they describe it, the same as in a Christian New Testament, Christian Old Testament. And what about the other books, the Apocrypha, the Pseudepigrapha, other missing books? This could be a long topic, but the way I like this, and someone explained to me, it's a bit like going into a Christian bookshop. You ever been into a Christian bookshop?
Yeah.
So, in a Christian bookshop, are all the books the Bible? No. You got lots of Bibles, but you got a bunch of other books, like on this table. None of that's sort of the Bible, and that's sort of the Bible, but everything else is not the Bible. So is this heretical? Are these missing books from the Bible that haven't been done there? No. They're other books. They have some value. A lot of them are worthwhile reading. Some of them are, but have a read of them. And they can add to your knowledge, particularly the ancient books, the Apocrypha, can add to your knowledge of things that happened around that time. But they're not the Bible. They're not the Word of God. They're just kind of useful historical stuff around that time. So I don't understand why people really get so confused about the missing books. Yeah. Okay, and archaeology. I love archaeological evidence. Just to back up, we talked a little bit about it before. So I'm just going to go 5 archaeological evidence, kind of running through biblical times. So one of those, the earliest reference to Israel is 1208 BC. So 1208 BC is a very, very early, because when did the Jews? They weren't even called the Jews at that time. When did the Hebrews or the Israelites, you could call them, come across the Jordan? Well, probably about 1250 BC. Okay, it's a bit dates in around this time is a bit anything before 966 and the founding of the Solomon Temple is a bit vague. But but here, just 40 odd years later, you've got the Egyptians going on a military campaign all the way through, and they have written this: the princes are prostrate, saying peace. Not one is raising his head. Among the 9 bows, now that Libya has come to ruin. Hatti is specified. The Canaan has been plundered. So these are all the places that the Egyptian army destroyed on the route. Ashkelon has been overcome. Giza has been captured. Yanoam is made on. Israel is laid waste, and his seed is not. Huru has become widow. So this symbol here is a symbol for Israel. So Israel existed as a nation, a very young nation, just 40 years or so after they came out of the wilderness. All the way down to 840 BC, the next one, the Moabite stone, a stele. So this is a kind of, people gave records of kings did afterwards. And this is interesting because this is the enemy of the Israelites, the Moabites, and they record this. And they say this: I am Mesha, son of Chemosh, king of Moab. Omri was king of Israel and oppressed Moab during many days. His son superseded. Chemosh said to me, go take Nebo against Israel. And I went into the night and I fought against it, and I killed in all 7,000 men, women and maidens, and I took from it the vessels of Jehovah. It's the first time that we see recording of Jehovah, Yahweh, the God, and offer them before Chemosh. And here we see from 2 Kings. So this is the other side. And you do get 2 sides in a war. So this is the other bit. Now Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep breeder, and he had to deliver to the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000. But when Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled, which is what we see there, against the king of Israel. So King Jehoram marched out of Samaria at the time and mustered all of Israel. Same thing, same war recorded, in the Bible and by a stele which dates back to 840 BC. Next one to go against, Sennacherib, king of the universe, king of Assyria, sits on a throne, the spoils of Lachish are paraded behind it. And this is, again, in the British Museum. And Sennacherib, king of Assyria, was besieging Lachish, with all his forces, sent his servants to Jerusalem to Hezekiah, king of Judah. So we see the same story recorded in this extraordinary and beautiful carving, which dates back to 701 BC. But he didn't get into Jerusalem. And it doesn't, of course, this doesn't record him being defeated. Same battle, same time to Hezekiah. And what did Hezekiah do because he was being besieged in Jerusalem? He built a tunnel. Have you been through this tunnel?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
I haven't either. Who has?
Chris has.
Chris. I'm so annoyed. I went to Jerusalem a year and a half ago and it was there. And this is my photo. But it was in flood. And they said, you can't go through it. And I was in a group of about 30 people. You can't go through it because it'll be up to your chest.
It was mid-thigh to him, so he could walk through it. It was mid-thigh.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I went back kind of sad, and we went, I'd seen it at least. And then I got back to the hotel, and one of my friends had followed at the back, and he'd gone through it on his own. And I was like, why am I such a wimp? Why am I not so? So now I'm going to go back to Jerusalem. But this was built, and it's recorded in 2 Kings 20, the deeds of Hezekiah in all his mind, how he made the pool and the conduit, which is the tunnel, and brought wit into this. So this was so that water would be inside Jerusalem, and it follows this line at the same Sennacherib invasion. And it's unbelievable. It's 530 metres long. There's even an inscription in the middle of it they found when the two sides met. From 700 BC, they tunneled, 2,700 years, they tunneled that way through the solid rock, and they met in the middle. Amazing. And still works to this day. Nineveh. A little bit Nineveh's interesting. I always think of Nineveh and you think about Jonah. But the Ninevites didn't listen to God. So they listened when Jonah went there, but 150 years later they hadn't listened and they'd become very sinful again. And so God sent, merciful God, he sent Nahum. And Jonah says about Nineveh was a great city, and that's recorded, probably believed to be the biggest city in the world in about this time. And this is some photos of the wall. This is Jonah's crazy journey, going away and then coming back to Nineveh. And there's the ruins of it today. I haven't been. It's in modern day Iraq. But it says in Nahum, this is the prophecy of what's going to happen. He remembers his officers. They stumble as they go. They hasten to the wall. The siege tower is set up. The river gates are opened. The palace melts away. And we know that Nineveh fell. And there's a Greek historian who records this. The river both inundated a portion of the city and broke down the walls for a distance of 20 states. Diodorus. So, and what we think happened is that the attackers deliberately dammed the river to flood the city and destroy its gates. And now it's 30 kilometers from modern-day Mosul in Iraq, and it says that the dam protecting the river is the most dangerous dam in the world, and it's quite likely that and if so, it falls, it'll be underwater again for 14 meters. Again, archaeological evidence which just talks about prophecy, and evidence is there, and it's just one of many. And this one, which we'll come back to, a lot of people said that Pontius Pilate never existed. He was a bit of a failure, Pontius Pilate. He wasn't the most successful politician. He certainly didn't follow much. But they said because he wasn't a great name, that he never existed. And then they found this. In 1961 in Caesarea Maritima, it was actually been taken, this stone, and put into a different wall, but they translated it to the divine Augustus Tiberius, who was the Caesar at that time, who was the Roman emperor at the time. Pontius Pilate. You can see it. Pontius Pilate. My Latin. Has dedicated, prefect of Judea, it says where he was, has dedicated this. And it's a temple, written in AD 26. So we know where it was, who it was. It defines everything that's in the Bible is true. There's another way we can look at it, which is messianic prophecies, which we can provide evidence of our Bible being true. I'm just going to look at a few of those. There's 300 messianic prophecies. You could spend all day on them, but I'll just look at 3 which are fun. From Micah 5:2, and Micah, Dead Sea Scrolls, written beforehand. Oh, Bethlehem. Have you anyone been to Bethlehem? Yeah? It's a little town.
Yeah.
To this day, it's a little town. It's only 10 kilometres from Jerusalem, but it's a very small, it's never been very big. It's a ridiculous place to say that you're going to have God or the Messiah coming from. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth one for me who is to be ruler in Israel, who's come forth as from of old. And the prophecy is realised that Joseph also went up to Galilee from the town of Nazareth to Judea to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem. Prophecy 1. An impossibility. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel. Isaiah 7:14. And Emmanuel means God with us, or Jesus is God. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to the city of Galilee named Nazareth to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name is Joseph. So the prophecy, messianic prophecy, is fulfilled. And thirdly, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion, shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you, righteous and having salvation. Is he humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Zechariah 9. And what did Jesus do? The disciples went out and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put them on him, and he sat on them, and he rode into Jerusalem. So prophecies are met. And this is a different kind of prophecy. This is a prophecy from Jesus Christ. So some of his disciples, it says in Luke, were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. And Jesus said, as for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down. And so what happened in 67 AD, the Jews rebelled against Rome and formed and pushed them out. Bold move. And they formed an independent state. Now, what do we know about the Jews? At that time, and Jesus talks about it, he talks about how all the coinage had the head of Caesar on it. And so they created their own coins for 3 years. From 67 to 70 AD, they created their own coinage, 1, 2, 3. And this coin is from 68 to 69 AD. It has the number 2 on it. And so this is one of the coins that they created. And then the prophecy was, I passed it around, so there you go. And if you want to look at it, it's a coin from Jerusalem, Israel, 68 to 69 AD. And the prophecy came true, that they created an independent Jewish state. And then in 70 AD, the Romans came. They besieged for a long time the walls of Jerusalem. They brought them down, and the temple was destroyed. The gold rolled down, melted down inside the rocks. The Roman soldiers pulled all the stones apart so they could get every last bit of gold that was in it. And nothing was left apart from the foundational wall, which is the Western Wall or the Weeping Wall, which you can get down to, which is the only thing left. That's it. Q&A on biblical accuracy. So prompts if you want them. A little bit of what we went through. Any questions about the accuracy or authority, of the Bibles, archaeological evidence, messianic prophecies? Any questions at all about it? Is this a convincing proof? Is this not? What do we start with? We didn't say proof. We should say, is this
undeniable evidence?
Yeah, evidence.
A bit beyond that, beyond reasonable doubt.
Beyond reasonable doubt. That's the term to use. But thank you. Well done. Yeah. Does this provide beyond reasonable doubt that the Bible is true?
Can I ask you a question? All your hands go up. So you talk about missing books. In Colossians, Paul talks about Colossians. Paul says to the Colossian church,
That's a good point.
exchange this letter with the Laodiceans, and you read the Laodicean letter. In my Bible, there is no letter to the Laodiceans.
Yes. You're absolutely right.
As far as I know. As far as that may be a trick question. But
No, you're very true.
What is your take on that?
There are many missing letters, and it'd be lovely they're right. We know that Corinthians, there are 2 books of Corinthians in our 1st and 2nd Corinthians, but we know there's probably at least 2 more missing ones. Yeah, a lot of books have disappeared. There is missing works. That's true. I think, and the letter of Laodicea. That's a very good question. Does that mean that our Bible is not? I think we have. It doesn't mean that there are some things missing from it, but that doesn't mean that we don't have that everything in it is not true. I think I would say that we have the Word of God in our hands, and that's evidence. And there is a chance that you could find one of these manuscripts could be found. You could find there is a possibility of that. I mean,
there is also a letter to the Laodiceans in Revelation. So we actually know that probably what Paul wanted to say to Colossae and Laodicea was quite similar, but yet by the time you get to Revelation, there's some fairly strong words for them there. So we know a little bit about Laodicea, I guess, but and you can still go there.
I mean, this is slightly different for people. I don't think you should, like I said, we shouldn't say the Bible is perfect, it's unchanged. We should be realists. So making the point that it's we're open to. There are words which have probably changed. There are, books which letters which we don't have. But that doesn't. But it is still. But it's more the point we should make. But it's unbelievably accurate. If you look at that book of Isaiah, for example, it's 99.85% accurate over, 1,100 years. That's extraordinary. With no significant meaning changes. We can believe it. There's enough. Is there enough here, to become a Christian? I don't know.
I have this vision of the Laodiceans receiving this letter and saying, "Oh, another letter for Paul. We're just a bit cold here. We'll put that one on fire."
Well, there were a lot of wars around that. But the fact that we got as much evidence as we got, if you think about Israel, my goodness, there's a war there now. There's been wars over that land. The fact that we have anything left at all is extraordinary.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Just a general sort of question. Could you explain to me just a little bit more about the Apocrypha? What books were in there and who decided when? Just a little bit more.
Yeah. So the Apocrypha, we mean in the books between the Apocryphal books are written after Malachi and before Jesus. So there are a collection of books, and you will find them in segments of many Bibles as an Apocrypha. There is debate but they're not quoted in the New Testament. There's a possible reference to one, but they don't form part. Jesus and the apostles quote many books of the Old Testament in the New Testament, but they don't quote from the Apocrypha. And I mean, I'm not an expert in them. I've read bits of some. A lot of them give interesting historical background between those periods in the
One or two Maccabees.
And the Maccabees is in between. There's the Old Testament Apocrypha and New Testament Apocrypha as well. Some additions.
The word means more, but I'm talking about the Old Testament one before, which is between Malachi, generally between Malachi and Jesus. So they provide some interesting, things like the Wisdom of Solomon, and so I would use them a bit like in a bookshop about reading books, which provide some evidence about, what's going on. And that provides quite interesting evidence because it's what leads up to New Testament period in Judaism. So they're quite fascinating.
I don't think they were in any of the early lists of canon at the beginning. I think around about the Middle Ages at some point the Catholic Church sort of decided to adopt them as scripture. And they are useful background writing, but like you say, Jesus never quoted from any of the Old Testament Apocrypha. So take them or leave them. But
the forming of we use the word canon. So the canon means God's word. So as you say, for the Old Testament Apocrypha, it's also pretty clear, is the Jews formed a canon of what was the Old Testament, probably in the 1st century AD, and that is exactly the same as what we have. So the Old Testament Apocrypha doesn't form the Jewish Bible. Generally, is, and even in a Catholic Bible is a separate segment, and referred to as, at the most extreme, it's generally is something else. So it's wise, I would say, of Christianity to have the same canon as the Jews. In terms of New Testament, there has the New Testament canon. There are various lists of what's in the New Testament book. So, but generally those New Testament lists are smaller, and the very, very early list of what's on the New Testament was canonical New Testament, didn't include some books, but then it kind of like, by a fairly early stage, there's a whole thing about when, but I think, by about 150 AD, it was pretty much agreed, and I'll come back to you on what the date was of it. I'll come back to you on, I'm going to say that. I'm going to come back to you, Andy, with a little bit of a study on when the canon was formed, and it was a slightly gradual process because I think
it was informally formed prior to it being
because the letters were gone off to individual churches in widespread and you got books like Galatians, the first one written about 55 AD down to 95 AD probably for Revelation. So they're written over 40 years, they're scattered, and then people, as we were saying, are sharing these letters. They're always intended to be shared and copied. So and then there was a sense like, well, let's bring that all together to form a canon. Okay, but I'm going to come back to you, Andy.
Good. Have we got any more? Or should we wrap it up at that? No, let's wrap it up at that. Let's give James another round of applause. Thank you very much. Tonight, absolutely magnificent talk. Very faith building, very encouraging. Definitely builds my faith just to see all those artifacts from the British Museum and other places, and even the one you brought with you, just showing us the truth of what is there. And I think for the worldview stuff as well, and I think you said, I wrote it down, I'm not sure if I wrote it down quite right, but if your worldview isn't working for you, then is it right? Let's think about, is our worldview working for us? And if it's not, then get into this and study the Bible, and definitely would like to do that if you would like to do that. So there we are. Great presentation. Stay around and have a look at the books.
Yeah,
finish
I
off
can
the
explain
food.
some of the books.
And I better give Selena a call and tell her that we're clearing out soon. So
and
I'll do that.
just to say, part 3 is tomorrow.
Yes,
so
it is. That's right.
At 10:30.
Community Hall.
We're going to look about why is the crucifixion so important to Christians, and what does Christianity have to offer me. So I'm going to provide a evidence about the cross. It's going to be a very different kind of communion to what maybe you've heard before, but trying to kind of like provide beyond reasonable doubt about what that Jesus existed, that he was crucified, that he was raised, and what does that mean for me as well. So that's love to see you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thanks so much. We'll stick around for 10 minutes and then, that's great. Thank you very much for coming. Cheers.